You know, when you think of the word perfection, especially when it comes to the human body, chances are the image that pops into your head was shaped, literally, thousands of years ago by the ancient Greeks. It's kind of crazy, but their art has so profoundly influenced our ideals of beauty that you can still feel its echo today in everything from modern art to superhero movies. So let's get into how they did it.
So let's start with this guy, the Doriophoros, or the spear bearer. Now, this is not just some statue. For centuries, this was the guide, the absolute blueprint for creating the ideal human figure. It really is the Greek obsession with perfection, carved in stone.
And that's the big question, right? What was their secret? What was the philosophy that drove this obsession? How did they manage to turn an idea into a repeatable, mathematical formula for beauty? And, maybe the most important question of all, what happens when you try to cram all the beautiful messiness of humanity into a perfect, rigid system?
To really get their art, you have to get inside their heads first. See, the Greeks didn't just sculpt, they argued a lot about what art was even supposed to be. And at the heart of that whole debate was this one single powerful idea.
That idea was mimesis, the Greek word for imitation. The central question they wrestled with was this: if all art is just an imitation of the real world, what's its value? Is it a noble path to truth, or is it just a cheap copy?
Well, the philosopher Plato, he was firmly in the cheap copy camp. He argued that true reality only exists in this world of perfect ideas or forms. So imagine there's a perfect idea of a chair. A carpenter then builds a physical, flawed copy of that perfect idea. Then an artist comes along and paints the physical chair, making their art a copy of a copy. For Plato, art wasn't a path to truth, it was a distraction.
But then his star student, Aristotle, comes along and says, hold on a minute. He saw it completely differently. Aristotle argued that by imitating something, art could actually strip away all the messy, unnecessary details and reveal a deeper, more essential truth about life. So for him, art wasn't a distraction from reality, it was a superhighway to understanding it. And you know, this wasn't just some dusty philosophical debate. It lit a fire under the artists, because if art could reveal a deeper ideal truth, then the challenge was clear. You had to create a system to capture it. They set out to create an actual formula for the perfect human being.
Now, their first attempts, like this Kouros statue, were, well, they were a little stiff. It's very rigid, very symbolic. It's got a certain power to it for sure, but it doesn't really feel alive, you know? It's not quite that perfect living imitation that Aristotle was talking about.
The real game changer was a sculptor named Pollitt. Around 450 BCE, he literally wrote the book on perfection. It was a treatise called the Canon, and it was basically a set of rules, a scientific, mathematical system for sculpting the ideal body. The original text is long gone, but its incredible principles live on in his work.
Okay, so his canon was built on three huge ideas. First, symmetria, which meant that every single part of the body had to be in perfect harmony with every other part. Second, a strict system of mathematical proportion, where the size of, say, the head would determine the exact length of everything else. And finally, and this is the secret sauce, a revolutionary new pose called contrapposto that brought these statues to life.
And wow, when you see them side by side, the impact of contrapposto is just night and day. By having the figure shift its weight onto one leg, the artist creates this subtle, natural S-curve through the body. The Kouros on the left, it's a statue. But the Doriophoros on the right, it feels like a living, breathing person, just caught in a moment, ready to move. The canon was a total revolution.
So creating these incredible figures obviously required insane technical skill. But who were the actual artists toiling away in the workshops? What do we know about them?
We tend to think of Greek sculpture as white marble, but their most prized works were actually bronze, and they were made using this super complex method called lost wax casting. You'd start with a wax model, cover it in clay, melt the wax out, and then pour molten bronze into the empty space. It was a painstaking, high-stakes process because you had to break the mold to get the statue out, meaning every single one was unique.
The thing is, very few of those precious bronze sculptures actually survived. But you know what we have in enormous quantities? Pottery. These painted vases are our best window into Greek daily life. They're myths, they're rituals. And for centuries, the default assumption has always been that the artists behind them were all men.
But that's the wild part. As archaeologist Sarah Murray points out, that was just an assumption, not something based on hard evidence. It was just the default. And some really interesting new research is starting to challenge that old story.
Yeah, researchers are finding all these fascinating clues. The geometric patterns you see on early pottery, they look a lot like the textile designs from weaving, which was a craft totally dominated by women. The funeral scenes painted on the vases, they show women in central leading roles. And maybe the biggest clue of all, archaeologists find way more ceramic pottery in the graves of women and children than in men's graves. This suggests it was just a much more central part of their world. So it's totally possible that the artists who gave us our greatest insights into ancient Greece were women.
So, whether it was men or women behind the art, this Greek quest for a perfect formulaic ideal was about to cast a shadow or a light that would shape the next 2,500 years of Western art. And what's cool is, even the Greeks didn't stick to the exact same formula forever. About a century after Pollitt, artists like Praxiteles took the canon and started to soften it up. His figures are still mathematically perfect, but they're more graceful, more sensuous, and they carry a much more human emotional weight. The formula itself was evolving.
Now fast forward almost 2,000 years. Artists of the Italian Renaissance rediscover these ancient works, and they are completely blown away. Michelangelo's David is a direct descendant of the Doryphoros. I mean, you can see it right there. The same contrapposto pose, the same idealized body, the same search for that perfect form. The canon was reborn.
But, and this is a really important but, Michelangelo didn't just copy and paste the formula. He added his own judgment of the eye. He understood that what's mathematically perfect doesn't always look perfect to us. He trusted his own artistic gut to break the rules just a little, to make small adjustments that achieved a higher, more believable sense of realism.
And that brings us right to the core of this whole thing, doesn't it? By creating a formula for perfection, did the Greeks unlock some universal truth about beauty? Or did they just create an impossibly high standard, a beautiful but totally artificial ideal that no real living human being could ever hope to match?
The Greeks gave us a blueprint for beauty that has lasted for millennia, there's no doubt about that. But they also left us with this huge lingering question. Is perfection a formula you can solve, like a math problem? Or is its real power in the fact that it's an ideal we can only ever strive for, but never quite reach?